Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Today, we're going to be talking about the seamless VMware migration to Amazon FSx, to Amazon Elastic VMware Service with Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP. My name is Karen Hassin. I am enablement specialist here at NetApp. And we'll give it just 1 minute for people to continue to join. But I see we have people coming in, so we'll just give it one more minute for those that are joining, and then we'll kick this off. So 1 minute. All right, I think we're on the 1 minute mark. All right, so for those that just joined, my name is Karen Hassin. I am enablement specialist here at NetApp. I support FSx for ONTAP and really focusing on VMware workloads. And joining me today, we have two panelists. The first one is Ben Lipman. He has a 25-year background in the storage and virtualization space. He is currently a specialist solutions architect in infrastructure migration and modernization team, and he has been at AWS for over 9 years. He specializes in bringing VMware workloads to the cloud. So welcome, Ben.
Thanks.
And our second panelist is Richard Nickel. He comes from NetApp. He's a cloud solutions architect with experience across Azure, GCP, and AWS. He is currently focused on FSx for ONTAP, just like me, and he's been involved with the service since its inception in AWS, so when it came about. Richard brings a wealth of technical knowledge and expertise managing projects, and he has a special emphasis in cloud migration and management of hybrid environments. So I think it's great to have you both here. Welcome, Richard.
Thanks, Karen. Glad to be here today.
Amazing. Okay, so let's start with a little bit of recap on something that we talked about our last time we did a webinar a few months ago around VMware modernization and what are the pathways available for customers. And really a little bit kind of to touch base and kind of refresh around that. There are several options for customers that are looking to modernize their VMware workloads on AWS. The first and the easiest path is to relocate that workload to Amazon EVS. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. The other options are to rehost to Amazon EC2, and you migrate and modernize those workloads. And the third pathway is to re-platform. And here with Amazon EC2 or with ECS and EKS, you can containerize those workloads. So with that, let's jump right in to talk about Amazon EVS. But before we go there, I would like to ask you questions. And we're going to be doing that a few times today. Really, what we want to do is kind of gauge your knowledge on the subject. So the first thing we want to know where you're at in that migration journey, modernization journey. Are you just exploring? You're trying to find out what options are out there. You're already in the planning stages. You're migrating already. You're in the middle of a migration. You're in progress, or you've already migrated, and you're looking to expand your presence in the cloud. And the second question is, how familiar are you with Amazon EVS? And a little bit about Amazon EVS, it went GA at the end of last year. I'm sorry, it went on gated preview at the end of last year, and it went GA in August of this year. So it's fairly new, but it's not net new. So with that, let's see what the results are. Okay. I can see there's a lot of people just kind of exploring and finding out what their
Yeah,
options
I
are.
yeah, I see that a lot, Karen. Like that definitely I've been on a lot of calls where customers are like just trying to figure out what it is, right? What it's doing, how we can use it, how they can leverage it and utilize it. Yeah, that makes a
Yeah,
lot
and
of
I
sense.
think that's the purpose of this webinar is really to provide you with as much information as possible. So if you have questions, please don't forget to send them to us through the Q&A, and we'll be tackling them at the end of this webinar. And regarding how familiar they are with Amazon EVS, I see that only 9% know, like, are really familiar. Most have heard of it or really don't really know that much. So that's great. I think that's perfect, because that's really what we're going to be talking about today. So with that, Ben, can you give us a quick intro as to what is Amazon EVS?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. It seems like, as the poll suggested, that there's plenty of people that need some of this foundational background. So let's dive into that. So Amazon Elastic VMware solution or service. So essentially, you can think of this as just VCF 5.2.1 on EC2 bare metal in your Amazon VPC. So really, this is the same software stack that you would run on premises, in premise in your data center. We're just giving you kind of a curated launch experience so that we install all the software for you, perform all the underlay networking, and then hand you over a fully functional VCF environment. Just like you were building a second data center, you just don't have to do all that hard work. So that's it in a nutshell.
Okay. All right. And what about licensing? Do we need a special license for this
That's
to
a
move
great
with
question.
Amazon EVS? Mhm.
Yeah, so this is based on VCF. So you need that VCF tier of license. And the good thing about VCF is when you buy it from Broadcom or a reseller, it's portable. So you can bring that to Amazon EVS. So some of our customers that we run into, they're going to do a renewal on-prem, but they also want to move. So they can take those core licenses and bring them to EVS. There was actually a change just recently announced by Broadcom. We intended to do a license included version of this,
Mhm.
but Broadcom decided to change the rules here. So all hyperscalers are going to be bring your own VCF subscription only. So that's the model we're going to work under.
Okay, so it's the same for everyone. It's not something special for AWS. It's everyone's
Exactly.
same boat. Yeah. All right. And what about those people that have legacy virtual machines that they've been out there for years? Maybe they have a lot of technical debt. The developer that worked on this quit years ago and they don't know how to work with that, and they don't want to risk it. What happens with that? How can we help them with in
Yeah.
AWS with ABS?
That's a good point, right? So that's why lift and shift is so appealing to customers because anything that's running on your vSphere 8 platform on-prem today can run on EVS, right? ESXi comes with that really broad guest operating system support list. And what I like to say is, use EVS to do that low risk, rapid lift and shift, and then figure out what you can modernize. You may be surprised and you may find things that are easier to modernize to EC2 or containerize, but you also may find workloads where you're surprised and you get stuck. But the beauty there is that they can remain. The things that get stuck can be right there and you can modernize what you choose as quickly or as slowly as you like. And they all can speak together with a high bandwidth, low latency connectivity. So I think it's easier to modernize cloud to cloud once you're already migrated rather than grabbing entire sets of applications and it's all or nothing. Either that stack works or you have to roll the whole thing back.
Right. Yeah, and nobody wants to do that.
No.
All right. So, um, so one of the benefits of Amazon EVS is precisely what you're saying, that you don't need to rewrite, you don't need to replatform your applications. You're literally continue to use the same VMware architecture that you use on-prem. You just kind of extend it to the cloud. I like this slide very much because it kind of shows it very graphically. Um, what do you what how can we how we let me rephrase this. how about the control of that environment? Now that it's in the cloud, and I know VM administrators like to have, own the kingdom and manage it. How does it work on Amazon EVS?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's really one of the big differentiators here is that you get full control to EVS. By the time we're done installing the VCF stack for you and the operating system and doing all the networking, we at the end of the process, we hand you the root access, all the admin users. There's no watered down administrator roles that limit what you can do or cloud consoles that kind of skin the NSX interface so we can filter what you do. This is the same exact experience as VCF on-prem. So really what you're showing is the big picture. This is just a second data center, and you can move things back and forth. You can design and architect the EVS side any way you like, just like on-prem today, right? But the real magic here is that once you land workloads in EVS, you're in the cloud. So all of those far right box things, those native cloud services, there's 200 plus services. You can access those with that same high speed, low latency connectivity, right? And what that allows you to do that's a bit more difficult in your own data center is to experiment and rapidly iterate. Try out data warehousing, our new AI ML services, agentic AI, which is the hot topic, right? Try things out. You can access them quickly. And if they succeed, you can roll it into production. If they fail, you can roll it back and then move on to something else.
Yeah, and you don't need to purchase, expensive hardware and just have it sunk there, sitting there in the data center just to do those type of trials, let's say.
Yeah,
Um,
there's no procurement time. You're not racking and stacking and doing build sheets. All that's handled for you, right? EC2, it's kind of like bare metal as a service. And then we install the operating system, we install VCF, and we just hand you over a fully functional thing.
so that brings me to my next question. What's the line that separates what AWS manages and what um, the customer is managing?
Yeah, that's a good point,
Mhm.
right? So because you have full control over EVS, it is something that we call customer supported, right? Meaning you're responsible for making sure you don't break things. Now, if you do break something, that's great because we can call AWS support and we'll help you with the whole stack, top to bottom, right? We'll look at the VMware layer, we'll look at the AWS EC2 layer, the VPC, and then we also help you with the FSX for NetApp ONTAP layer. So it's a one-stop shop for support, and it's all AWS services.
Okay. And let's talk about the different use cases that we see for VMware migration to the cloud.
Perfect. Yeah, we kind of like think about migrations quite often, but some customers, as you can see in the upper left, they just want to stop buying new hardware, right? So if that's your prerogative, you're like, hey, I like my data center. Maybe I have a mainframe here. I'm comfortable with it, but we don't want to keep landing racks, or maybe we can't add power, or we're space constrained. You can use EVS as a data center extension. And what we call that is kind of that burst to cloud model where you're extending your data center to add capabilities or compute, and then you're moving workloads back and forth. Maybe there's a seasonal burst and you want to move a stack to the AWS side so it can grow really big and kind of shrink back down. So that's one of the use cases. Rapid migration is really the most common one I run into. The customer has decided, hey, I want to get out of the data center business entirely. What's the fastest way to get to the cloud? And really, it's faster because you don't change anything. It's just moving it from one VMware to another. The drivers are still the same. The VMC's the same NICs, the same disks, right? So the VM just wakes up and it says, oh, okay, I had a reboot, but really you've moved it. DR is a big one too, right? When we build a secondary data center for DR, it is doubling our cost. Plus, we have to maintain and build and keep in sync two different data centers. So when you can leverage the cloud for the DR side, it gives you this pilot light option, right? Where maybe you just have 4 hosts all the time, but during a DR test or a DR event, you scale those hosts up, do your test, scale it back down. Something that you can't really do in the data center, just snapping your fingers and saying, give me 10 more bare metal hosts. And by the way, install the operating system on it, right? So that's another really strong use case where customers can cost optimize by running just enough to have that shorter recovery time to get your test up and running and checked off, or during a DR event, that shorter time to recovery to get your systems back up. So that pilot light's really powerful to cost optimize, yet keep your recovery time low. And some customers, this is just the start of their AWS journey, right? They want to modernize, but they're not sure where they want to start, and they're not sure if they can take a whole app stack at a time. So get your VMware into AWS, and then you can figure out, maybe you do managed database services, managed file services, figure out what's easy and quick, and get those wins under your belt, or analyze it and see what's my highest TCO to modernize. Let's start there and start saving money quickly.
All right. Okay. So with that, let's ask another question. Before we move on to explaining FSx for ONTAP and how that connects with Amazon EVS, we want to know, how familiar are you with FSx for ONTAP? And just let us know. And while we're at it and while you're answering, just wanted to mention that FSx for ONTAP was part of that gated preview and was tested with Amazon EVS. So Richard, do you want to kind of chime in a little bit about that?
Yeah. This would almost be a little bit of a preview, right? When we were doing that testing, like it went so well. Like anytime, like this is early access, right? And you think you're going to hit problems, because it was so well integrated into the way the AWS networking works. Like we tested all the different protocols with different data store layouts, right? Everything really worked like seamlessly, and we were able to quickly reach performance levels that we would expect that a particular FSx ONTAP system could handle, right, for a particular protocol, right? So we were really, really like super pleased right out the gate of like how seamless it was to integrate these services.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Okay. We have 21% people that really know the product, which is great. But we do have quite a bit of people also that are not so familiar. So we'll take that into account for our conversation today. Ben, before we jump in and present FSx for NetApp ONTAP, one of the things that I often find is that, for example, in this case, this is a perfect scenario. We have NetApp people and AWS people talking about this product, and actually the actual product name has both companies mentioned. So, and I know it creates a bit of confusion. So what is it? Is it a NetApp product? Is it an AWS product? What is it?
Awesome. Yeah, that's a perfect question to start off with, right? So it is an Amazon service, right? We use the NetApp technology and we closely partner with NetApp to develop the technology, but we develop it, we improve it, we support it. So it's a first-party AWS service. Or as we were saying before, when you call support, you get the support for the full stack, the VMware bits, the AWS VPC and EC2 Metal, as well as the storage. So it's a one-call, one-stop shop. And the fact that we own the service, it gives us tighter integration, so we can build features that work together better, because we're hearing that feedback from the customer, and we're kind of working backwards from what they say they want us to build.
And I know it is a fully managed service. So can you further explain what does that entails to be fully managed?
Yeah. So FSx for ONTAP, when you go into the console and you provision it, you tell us the details of how you want it to deploy. And then, 30 minutes later or whatever, it's up and running. So it's fully managed in the fact that you don't have to monitor the components, the health of things. AWS will do that for you. And essentially, it just connects into the VPC of your choice. Now, EVS is a customer managed solution, right? So EVS is really more of a launch wizard. So we can take the heavy lifting away from you of installing the VCF bits and just hand you over to manage on your own all the VMware parts, right? We still support it, but you operate it and you own it. So there's a little bit of a nuance there. Now, of course, if a customer says, Ben, I don't want to manage it, that seems like work that I don't want to do, we've got partners out there that will sell a remote management service to you. So you say, hey, partner X, please come in, here's some credentials, tell us when something's broken, replace a host if it fails in the middle of the night, tell us it's done, things like that. Maybe upgrade my VMware bits a couple times a year. So you get the best of both worlds. If you're comfortable managing it because you've been doing this for decades in your data center, you can just manage it, right? We're not going to be overly prescriptive and say, no, we need to keep control over it. But if you want that easy button, white glove support, you can have a partner come in and do that for you.
That's great because it gives you flexibility. Now, this brings me to the next question. The primary storage on Amazon EVS is vSAN. Why should we even think about adding another storage to EVS?
Perfect. Yeah, I mean that's the existential question, right? And there's two kind of categories of answers. The really easy one is hyperconverged systems like VCF. You never really want to scale an entire host, pay for the CPU, the RAM, the licensing, all that stuff just to get a little more disk, right? On a 4-host EVS environment, you get about 60 TB usable of vSAN, which most customers need a bit more. So the first and easiest answer is decoupling the storage from the hyperconverged infrastructure and allowing that storage to scale independently. You can scale the storage to petabytes and keep your host footprint the same. And that's a huge savings for you in cost, right? So that's the first answer, and it's really easy. But I think the better answer is when you can take advantage of enterprise-grade storage array features, right? And Richard's going to get deep into this kind of stuff in the second half of the presentation, but just high level compression, deduplication, compaction, cloud tiering, all these different things that NetApp's been doing well for so many years, for decades, right? You get that superpower to combine and enhance Amazon EVS. And really, that also lets you lift and shift your skill set, right? You've got NetApp administrators and engineers. You're comfortable. You know how it works. You can use the same exact NetApp you're comfortable with. Use SnapMirror to migrate. Use clones to copy data. All that stuff you're used to with NetApp. It's a fully featured NetApp array in the cloud. So I think it's really a better together story.
Yeah, definitely. And I would like to double down on what you said about the decoupling. So that's really the number one, the main, the big hit to the bottom line. And Richard, can you further explain and go a little bit more in detail on this?
Yeah. So if you think about the hyperconverged nature, right, of an ESX, with storage that comes with that, right, in your VCF environment, you're going to get an I4I metal, right, as that's the first iteration. Hopefully, there's more coming in the future. But when you start out, you're going to be having I4I metal, and if you just need a little bit more storage, right, you would have to have a whole nother I4I metal, right, to get just that storage. But you're fine with your compute side, right? And so that's really going to drive up your costs when you just need a little bit more storage. And in a little bit, right, and we're going to get into the demo. And I have a TCO calculator where we can really look at that in detail. You can see it very specifically.
Yeah, I'm waiting to see that because it's really it's eye-opening when you look at it. All right. So the next, let's say the next benefit comes from the improvement in performance that you get by leveraging FSx for ONTAP for the backup process. Richard, do you want to take that one as well?
Sure. Yeah. So with this, right, really what we got to think about is how you can leverage, ONTAP technologies to get the best out of how to do backups and how to meet your SLAs around backups. So so if we take a look here, I'm going to try to keep it pretty brief. But on the left-hand side, we have a data store running on vSAN, and generally for that type of environment, you have to take a VMware snapshot, and then you have to use some type of backup service to transfer that data out. So there's just two things to keep in mind: having a VMware snapshot has an impact on future writes, right? So the next write that comes in has to take into account those deltas, and that can impact your performance. The second thing is this data transfer, right, has to traverse the ESXi host, so it's more processing the ESXi host have to do, right? And then if you contrast that with using, we have a data store running on NFS, in this particular case, on FSx for ONTAP. We still take a VMware snapshot. If we want a consistent VMware image, we can also do crash consistent. It's really kind of up to the customer which way they want to do that. We definitely have a mix in on-prem of how customers do that. But as soon as we take that VMware snapshot, we can take a NetApp snapshot. And so I saw some people were not familiar with NetApp. They are space efficient, they're pointer based, they're instantaneous. And so as soon as we take that NetApp snapshot, we can delete that VMware snapshot. Therefore, we're not having any impact on future writes. And a couple other things here with the way we're doing backup, we're replicating to another FSx ONTAP system. That FSx ONTAP system can be sized much smaller, right? It can have a lower throughput. It can also put most of the data at the capacity tier, so you're not paying right for SSD grade, right, when you're doing this. And then finally, this transfer of the SnapMirror data is offloaded, right? It's not affecting your ESXi host. It's happening at the storage layer, right? So you can do this without affecting your ESXi host at all. So it can really make it more advantageous for you.
Wow. Thank you, Richard. And this takes me to the following and the last main, let's say, we try to put it on like the 3 main benefits that come from adding FSx for ONTAP to your Amazon EVS. And the third one has to do with migration and the ease of management of the hybrid cloud, especially if you come from an ONTAP on-prem environment. Can you explain a little bit better, Richard, how we help that, how that happens?
Yeah, so just from the highest levels, right, we make it really easy to get the data there. You can have a data store running on-prem, and you can have this. You can set that data store the exact same way. And if you're running an NFS data store, we'll get into protocols in a minute. You can run that NFS data store on EVS just like you had an NFS data store on-prem. The SnapMirror is data deduped and compressed in transit, right? So you're minimizing that footprint, right, as you move that data up. And then really you can leverage all the ONTAP features you have. Maybe you're using SnapBlock, right? You can continue to use that to protect your data. You can still use the snapshot stuff that I showed before, right? So you can operate in the exact same way. There's also things about the VAI plugin for the people that are more VMware savvy, which basically just means it offloads certain activities to the storage layer. For example, if you're creating a VM from a template, instead of actually creating that VM and moving that data around, you can offload that with a NetApp Flex clone, which is again using that snapshot technology to be instantaneous, pointer-based, only writing the deltas, right? So we can bring all of those kind of ONTAP goodness up into EVS, and you get that benefit while you're running in the cloud that you were used to on-prem as well.
Plus, I think you forgot something to mention. We have the multi-protocol support, which also makes it a lot easier, and you don't have to duplicate data sets as well.
Yes, that's 100% right. Thanks, Karen. Yeah, we also support multi-protocol. So if you have any type of multi-protocol requirements, and those are the types of things like when I'm talking to customers, I ask those questions. Think about how they're migrating into the cloud. What are you doing on-prem? Do you have NFS and NFS and SMB accessing the same data? Will you need that same thing if you take this whole footprint right outside a data source, but also external storage, right, guest mounts and things like that, and take all that up to the cloud? You'll still have those requirements. How will you handle that in the cloud?
Exactly. Okay, so let's shift to Ben. What happens? So, of course, we talked about the goodness of how you migrate and you manage if you have an on-prem, ONTAP environment to the cloud. But what about those customers that have VMware on-prem but are not using NetApp storage on-prem? How would that migration go, and how would that be managed in this case?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? Because unfortunately, not everyone is running NetApp on-prem. We do have other arrays out there.
Yeah.
So, the main way we migrate VM data that's in the form of a VM disk, a VMDK that's on a data store, is with the hybrid cloud extension tool, which is VMware's first-party migration tooling, right? I love using SnapMirror to backhaul because I think array to array just makes sense. But when you have dissimilar arrays, you just can't do that, right? There's no cross-vendor SnapMirror. So in that case, we would just implement HCX. It comes with the VCF licensing, so there's no additional cost. And with HCX, essentially, you just batch up, a couple hundred VMs in a wave. Once it's seeded, it replicates all the bits. You go to your cutover window. The machines just wake up on the other side and reboot to the cloud. There's even live migration with IP preservation if you do the layer 2 extension part, right? So that's going to take you from data store to data store and move all those VM bits for you. Now, someone mentioned RDMs in the chat. That's a really good, those are still out there. iSCSI to the guest is still out there. Or you may just have on this, maybe an Isilon array or something, some SMB or NFS exports where you're like, how do I get these over? So AWS has a service called Data Sync. You can set that up and say copy from this location to this location. So that's one way you could try to do it to get your network file shares. In the past, I've used rsync or robocopy. Those are nice because those you can set it up, as HCX is doing all your VM disks, you do one pass and you seed your file shares. And then right before cutover window, you do another pass and it does a block level delta sync to get your file shares all consistent after you drain all the connections, and then you just cut your shares over. So we have to get a little scrappier when you're not going like to like, but there's still tons of ways to do it.
All right. Okay. So now let's shift over to look at the architectures. And before we go these are the data stores and guest mounts that we have. And then Richard's going to go over the architecture so people can see it. Go ahead, Richard.
Yep. I'll try to be pretty brief here. But from the highest level, because I also saw these questions coming in through the chat. Hey, what kind of data stores can we use, right? So NFS, right? So if you're doing NFS on-prem and you work the same way in the cloud, sure, NFS. iSCSI, same thing. You can use that same data store in the cloud. We also now support NVMe. A blog came out about that recently. So you got multiple, options when you're looking at your data stores in the cloud. And then for guest mounts, currently we support NFS v3 and SMB 3. And again, when you think about guest mounts, that's a lot of time where you might be using the multi-protocol, where you have some type of shared data that your Linux VMs that are running in your EVS and your Windows VMs that are running inside your EVS need access to similar data. And so this, just from the high level, again, I'm not going to dive down into the architecture too much, but the main thing I want to point out here is, yeah, you can see we have NFS traffic, iSCSI traffic, right? We're mounting the data stores coming from the ESXi hosts that are inside the EVS. This EVS is deployed in your VPC. Your FSx ONTAP is deployed in your VPC. The routing mechanisms, that's why it was so easy, I said before, when we first started doing the testing, is there wasn't a whole bunch of complexity set up. It's the regular subnets and route tables and security groups, right? When I set up how to set up a data store for NFS, it's the IP address of your FSx ONTAP, SVM, right? Data lift. That's it, right? It was exactly the same as you set up on-prem. You go into your vSphere client, you say, basically mount your data store. Only make sure I had to do to put in the guide was say open up the security group that's attached to that ENI for your FSx ONTAP system, and good, you're good to go, right? So real high level, it's in your VPC. We could also do VPC peering. You probably wouldn't want to do transit gateway with data store, but you could technically. So anyway, yeah, that's the high level for what this architecture looks like. We will go to the guest mounts now because we're a little short on time. And then so the guest attached storage, right? This is, again, it's very similar. I saw some questions in the chat, and I want to take just a second to explain the architecture here. You have an overlay network, right? Your VMs are running there. That is a unique IP space from your underlying AWS architecture. So I want to make sure that was clear, because there's some questions there where it seemed a little not as clear, right? So you can set that up to be whatever you want, but it cannot conflict with your AWS VPC. And then really, once you're in there and you have your VMs running, you can just mount the IP address, and there's a little bit of networking that happens. There's a BGP router in there that Amazon sets up for you to go in and out of that network, right, across those networks, but it's all taken care of automatically, right? So you don't have to think about it too much, right? And basically you're just mounting an NFS share from your VM. You go into the VM level and say mount, right? So again, it's very straightforward. We don't even have any guides around it because there's nothing unique about it.
All right, so that takes me to our next topic. And I want to talk to you, now that we've talked about Amazon EVS and about FSx for ONTAP, I want to talk to you about Workload Factory. And for those that are unfamiliar, Workload Factory is a software as a service that allows you to plan and to practically orchestrate your workloads on FSx for ONTAP. It is a free service. It has no cost. And what it does, it really helps you plan, deploy, and manage those workloads that you may have. We have features like different pillars that work with general storage, databases, and of course, VMware. And for VMware, we have two different tools. The first one is the TCO calculator, which we will later on show you a demo, It's really easy. It's very intuitive. You don't really need to know a lot to be able to use it. It's really straightforward. And it will help you quantify the impact of adding FSx for ONTAP to your EBS deployment. So with that, you can play with the numbers, you can see the cost breakdown, you can see where the savings are coming from. And remember that FSx for ONTAP is an external storage for Amazon EBS, and as such, it allows the decoupling of compute from storage. And that's exactly where all those savings come from. And then we also have, once you've decided that you want to migrate to the cloud, you've already done your business case, you're ready to move, then we have this tool called the Migration Advisor, which will help you architect and build that deployment. Richard, do you want to put something really fast about the Migration Advisor and how it works?
Yeah. So basically, the Migration Advisor one is going to help you, like, once you determine what your system is going to be, it's going to help you actually say, hey, these are my requirements, right? What is that going to look like for an FSx for ONTAP system? What are the throughput SKU I should use, right? How much actually SSD space will I need? And then it will also put in best practices around how you're going to connect up your ESXi host, right? And it will actually apply those if you give the right permissions into the tool. You can actually have it set those on the ESX host directly from the tool.
Yeah. And I think with that, we're ready for the demo. So
Okay,
I'll stop
awesome.
sharing. I'll pass it on to you.
All right. Okay, so what we have here is console.workloads.netapp.com. This is a SaaS tool. You can see at the very top here, right? You could easily, like, anybody can go to this tool. It's 100% free, right? You don't have to pay for it. You can basically click over here on the right if you've never been to the tool before and set up request access to the tool. It's like 2 or 3 fields you had to fill in. Then once you're in here, there's a VMware section. We have multiple workloads we support, but we're concentrating on VMware today. And you can go to Explore Savings, Amazon EBS, and this brings up a calculator. As Karen had mentioned, right, it's really simple and straightforward. We basically say, hey, give us your specs for what your think your EBS environment is going to look like, right? What's your required CPU? And we had these really nice sliders, right, that can move this left and right. Same thing with what's your required physical memory. Again, we have a slider that can move it left and right. And obviously, as you have more memory, you may get less benefit out of using FSx for ONTAP. Over on the right, we show that as well. But obviously, if you have storage requirements as well, right, then you're gonna slide this. You basically see, you can save a lot of money by leveraging FSx for ONTAP. So basically, you can just move these sliders to whatever values you want, what makes sense, what your actual true system is. And then we also say, put you here an EBS billing plan. This is, again, just to give that total cost. These are like list prices. And this is on demand 1 year, 3 year. This is for the ESXi hosts themselves, right? The i4, iMetal, like how you're paying for those, right? This has nothing to do with VCF subscription licensing, right? Type stuff, right? So it's just that. And then now, if we scroll down here a little bit, it will show you, hey, if I'm selecting this, what are you recommending for your FSx for ONTAP system? And I did see a question in the chat. Oh, do you get dedupe and compression, right? That type of thing. Yes, you do. So we actually showing you here the estimated savings capacity from ONTAP storage efficiencies, 26 terabytes, right? So these are values that we've gotten from working from VMware workloads on-prem for 30 years, right? We know these are the types of values, usually around 33% we see on average. But obviously, you had a VDI workload, you can see 90%. So, this is just a quick swag, right, guess about what you're expecting maybe to see on those types of savings. And then it shows you a breakdown on how much will that FSx ONTAP storage cost you, right? But over here on the right, also the really kind of important part of why you would want to integrate FSx for ONTAP as well is this is showing that if you just did EBS host without FSx ONTAP, this is what your cost would be, and here it is with EBS and FSx ONTAP. And the reason is that with what I've selected here, obviously these values can change, you would actually require 9 EBS hosts, but you only need 4 for the compute and memory. That's because I have a relatively large footprint on the storage, but that can be the case. And in the future, we will have different SKUs for the ESXi host, right? And this will change this calculator when those happen as well. And so basically you say, hey, what's my estimated cost for storage only for the EBS host cost? So essentially, you're paying for extra hosts, right? And that's going to drive up your cost. Whereas it'd be better if you could move that storage at a cheaper price point with a dedupe and compress, and not having to pay for compute that you're not using, right? So this is all laid out here, and it's really nice little tool. It's real simple. I know AWS has their own calculators, but to me, like, hey, I can even just see what's my compute cost, what's my VPC route server. That's that thing that talks between the overlay and the underlay network. The control plane, they charge a little bit for just having this environment up and running and monitoring it, right? So you can see all of those values, but really the main thing that here is you can just quickly say, hey, with these values, right, does it make sense to add FSx for ONTAP? Now, I will make it the argument that even outside of just this cost savings, right, all those other things we said about the enterprise grade features that you get may be reasons for using it. Do you have some SLAs around how you do your backups? Do you have the ability, do you have to have snap block protection, right, on your data? All these things we add to that equation as well. And lastly, there's a contact an expert by email. So if you start playing with this calculator, you have questions around the calculator, you have more questions around EVS and FSx for ONTAP, click on this, and actually I'm on this list, so I'll get an email, and I know Ito from my group will as well. So yeah, that's basically the quick overview of the calculator. Please try it out. Let me see, stop sharing, and I'll hand it back to Karen. I think you're on mute, Karen.
Are you seeing this screen?
No, I'm just seeing you now currently.
Okay, 1 second. I think we're okay. All right, so here you have the QR code that will take you to Workload Factory. You first need to register in order to be able to use it. So this link will take you to the registration page if you've never registered with Workload Factory. If you've already registered, it will take you directly there. Remember, this is completely free. You can play around with it, put in your numbers. You can try different scenarios and figure out how much would be the cost savings of adding FSx for ONTAP to your Amazon EVS. And I think we're almost on time to open up for questions. I just want to recap really fast what we talked about. The first thing is Amazon EVS is the fastest, most secure modernization path for your VMware workloads on AWS. You get to keep your VPC. You continue to use the same tools as if you were on-prem. And this allows you also to move to the cloud those legacy applications that maybe you're a bit afraid or you don't want to risk them. The other thing is Amazon EVS uses as a primary storage vSAN. So it is a hyper-converged infrastructure. And if your workload needs exceed the host storage capacity, you will find yourself having to add expensive hosts just for the storage. So anytime you have to add additional hosts just for the storage, this is when you need to think about adding FSx for ONTAP to reduce those costs and just pay for the storage and decouple that storage. So with that, I think we can open up for questions. I saw it was very active. There was a lot of questions coming up in this session today. So I love that. I love that people are asking questions. That's good.
There's one question that was in there that I thought maybe Ben could answer. It says, what about VM Windows Server 2022 and 2025? Does EVS support and license this kind of workload?
I was hoping we were going to be able to dodge that one. I'm just kidding. So today, no. Unfortunately, in October 2019, Microsoft restricted customers from doing BYOL of Windows Server licensing to AWS. What we need to support those newer versions of Windows Server is what we call license included, which is on the roadmap. I don't have a timeline, but we're working on it really hard. That's one of our top 2 or 3 features we're trying to launch as soon as we humanly can, right? So for now, what we tell customers is, hey, if you've got a large migration, save those for the end. And if you get to the point where we don't have it yet, you can land those on EC2 and just kind of carve those out. And if you really want a pure VMware implementation, you can repatriate those back from EC2 to EVS when we get license included. So we're working on that diligently. It's a great question, but unfortunately, we weren't able to hit GA with Windows license included. Now, SQL Server is a different story. There's generous BYOL use rights for Microsoft SQL Server with or without software assurance. I think it just that makes it so that you either need or don't need the dedicated infrastructure. So Windows Server is a little tricky for now, but we're working on that.
Okay. Let me see what else we have. There's a lot. I don't know which one to start off with. Let's see. There's something about IP addresses. Do the IP address of the VMs change after migrating to AWS to Amazon EBS?
Yeah, doesn't have to, right? So with HCX, you've got this really convenient layer 2 extension which can stretch your subnet from on-prem into EVS. That means you can move VMs and they seamlessly reach back without IP changes. Now, there are other ways to preserve IP addresses, but what we do at that point is we do our migration waves based on an entire routed segment on-prem, right? So we take a whole /24 and say, that's our migration wave, move those over, and then we unroute that subnet from on-prem, route it from EVS, and then cut our machines over. So there's two ways to do it. Usually folks want to choose their migration waves without following subnet boundaries. So that's where the layer 2 extension from HCX really comes in to make it easier so that they can seamlessly reach back.
Okay. Do we get deduplication and compression saving?
Yes, yes. Yeah, the short answer, yes. We mentioned that multiple times, but the question's in there, so it's always good to highlight it again. Yes, we do get deduplication and compression. And I was working with one customer in the past on ONTAP that was using a VDI environment for VMware, and they got 90% deduplication, right? In that type of environment. Obviously, that's a high-end use case, right? Where you're going to get that much. As I said before, I think on average we put into the calculator like 33%, right? It's going to vary a lot, but for sure you get that with FSx for ONTAP.
Okay.
And then like SQL files, like data and log files are extremely compressible. I wouldn't be surprised to see 80+% compression on those.
Okay. There's another question. Please provide the recommendations for file type and block type migrations from on-prem to the cloud.
Yeah, so we kind of covered that, right? If you're ONTAP to ONTAP, just snap mirror the whole thing. You could use HCX for the VMDKs, but you could also use snap mirror, right? Once we get into heterogeneous source destination pairing, right? I've got an Isilon here and I want to move to ONTAP and AWS. We do have an ISV partner I mentioned called Cirrus Data, which can take data from your on-prem data center and say, I'm going to spit that out into different types of AWS storage services. So there's an ISV solution to make that easier. Otherwise, we just kind of break it down storage by storage and say, oh, okay, VMDKs, HCX can bring that. If you've got, let's just hit something weird, RDMs or iSCSI to the guest, that's an interesting one. I would probably convert that to a VMDK and then move it or something like that. That's going to be a little trickier to say, how do we get this LUN over to a different LUN on ONTAP? That I don't see that quite as much. And then files, we mentioned AWS Data Sync. It's an AWS service to say, copy this stuff over to here, and then robocopy rsync, any of those resumable block level copy tools is what I usually would use for file shares. And then all you do is you script out your ACLs. So you say copy all the ACLs here, replay them over there, and then make sure your namespace somehow, right, your DNS name or whatever sending connections to those shares is updated to land on the new side. So it's pretty straightforward stuff, but it's easier when it's ONTAP to ONTAP, obviously.
Yeah. And it's faster also. There's this kind of reiterates, but I see the question is here, so I'm going to ask it. When we purchase EVS, it comes with vSAN storage. Is there a way we can offset the vSAN cost when we choose NetApp as our primary storage? And this is where I think it's the confusion. We're not the primary instead of vSAN. So is it like instead of paying more ECSI XI hosts, we will choose FSX and reduce the compute costs? So I just want to clarify that we're not the primary. The primary is vSAN at the moment. Whenever your storage needs exceed the capacity of the host, that's when you need to add FSx for ONTAP.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would add, in the fullness of time, we do plan on adding plenty of more host types. And some of these new host types that we add may be what we call EBS only, meaning they come with no local NVMe. At that point, you're not paying for that 30 TB of local disk that the i4i has. And then you could just say, I'm going to pretend that vSAN's not here and just not use it. Broadcom's not going to give you credit for not using it, unfortunately. It is what it is, right? But at that point, if we had an EBS only instance, then you're not just leaving that NVMe disk unused. Now, today, if you wanted to, you could create a secondary cluster and do NFS only, but then you're leaving the vSAN disk there and the vSAN licensing. So you're not really saving money doing that. In the future, when we get EBS only or instances with just a little bit of EBS, there's more and more value add to bringing ONTAP in as your main data store.
Okay. This question also we covered, but I'm just gonna reiterate: VCF licenses included by AWS. It's not. It's bring your own license by Broadcom, and it's across all clouds, not just AWS. It's a Broadcom directive.
Karen, I did see one new message in there.
You
Ben's
do?
typing an answer
Okay,
to
go
it.
ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
I think he answered something similar before, but yeah, I don't know if you want to type it or answer it live.
Ben is kind of writing, but you want to answer it, Ben?
The physical RDM one?
Yeah.
Yeah, since it just popped
Yeah,
in.
it's a good question, right? So I'm not sure if HCX can carry that data over. I thought it was just data store disks, but I could be wrong. So for physical mode RDM, if it's NetApp to NetApp, I would synchronize that LUN with SnapMirror and then replumb the RDM to the guest when the guest comes over. But yeah, that's that trickier one where it's like, what is the best way to take a LUN from here and make it a LUN over there if they're not NetApp to NetApp? I would just kind of unpack that use case by use case. Personally, do you really need the P mode RDM? Because we can do shared VMDKs now, right? So personally, I would probably do tinkering on-prem to say, if we can cut our P mode RDM over to a shared VMDK and then have our clustering, consume the VMDKs, then HCX can backhaul that. But it's a good question. It's a tricky one. I would probably just kind of unpack that and do some testing and see which path seems to make the most sense for you. Fortunately, I don't see a whole lot of that anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
And your Oracle, if you're an Oracle rack or a SQL failover cluster, sometimes the best answer isn't to move it. Back when I was doing this hands-on professionally, I would prefer to build a nice, shiny, clean cluster on the far side and then do replication at the database level. Script out all my principles and security and certificates and stuff like that. And then I've got a nice, fresh built infrastructure. And, so then I'll use HCX for everything else, but then do asynchronous database replication. And then when you're ready to cut the VMs over, promote that asynchronous replica to readable and then cut the mirror. And then you've got a nice, shiny, clean database system on the far side that you built. And it's kind of up to your standards. So that's, if you're up for the extra work, that's how I would always do it in the past.
All right.
Great questions.
Yeah, I think we have super great questions. There's one more that you answered, Ben, but maybe we should also, for the benefit of everyone on the call, can you lift and shift older versions of ESXIs? Let's say a version 6.5.
Yeah, so that's a good question, right? Let's just say that you've got a really old version of ESXi on-prem. What the first thing I do is I go to the compatibility matrix to say, hey, does cross vCenter migration work? Does HCX work? Sometimes the answer is yes, but there's an asterisk and it says, okay, maybe you can't live migrate, but you can bulk migrate or you can cold migrate, right? So check the VMware compatibility matrix to say, I'm moving between this and this. What are my options? And that'll help surface like, maybe live migration won't work. Worst case scenario, you can always export to an OVA, you can do backup restore. There's lots of different ways to move the bits. The question is what's compatible, what's supported, and what's the easiest, fastest, right? So usually we're just kind of hunting down our preferred list till we say, oh, okay, on a 6.5, we have to do it this way or this way, and then you choose your tool. It's a good question.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, I think we don't have any more questions. I think we've covered them. So, oh, there's one more just came in. What replication capabilities do we have from disaster recovery perspectives? Additionally, how granular can we get with recovery? It's a good question.
So if I understood that correctly, it's basically the recovery point objective, the granularity, how close to synchronous can we get,
Yeah.
right? So if we talk about business continuity, you could always have two availability zones and a multi-AZ ONTAP, and then there's 0 RPO, it's synchronous, right? But the moment we get outside of the region, which is usually what we're talking about for disaster recovery, 100 miles plus, we start having to lose data because we don't want to put back pressure on the source system to ensure that things are act on the far side. So we'd go asynchronous at that point. And then I think the quickest we can fire off snap mirrors is what, Richard, every 2 minutes or so. You probably only want to do every 5 or 10 minutes, right? Like, because there's a physics problem here where you can only snap and push blocks so quickly, right?
Depends on your change rate, right? Obviously, like what you could get away with, right? So 5 minutes, right? Kind of minimum. We wouldn't go lower than that, and obviously your change rate has to be able to match that you can move that across the wire in that type of time frame, right? Before you start, missing the next replication, right? So yeah.
Exactly. And then if you expand your scope to other types of DR, like if you're kind of doing a VM snapshot style, snapshot and then ship, that's probably every 15 to 30 minutes. Think about like Veeam or something like that. If it's more like a tool like Zerto, where it's saying journal and then push the blocks as fast as we can, or VMware Site Recovery Manager, I know they've renamed it since, you can push that recovery point sub 15 minutes. But typically we run into this physics problem of, like Richard said, we have to push this data and we've got X number of latency and this much payload. How quickly can we do that before the next interval? And it's usually, on the best day, sub 15 minutes is typically what we're saying. When we have a true DR of 100+ mile separation, usually the physics of pushing the data, the change blocks, gets us in that 5 to 15 minute range. Obviously, the farther you go or the more latency, the worse that interval gets, right? If you're pushing it halfway around the world or you're coming across a satellite connection, it's going to be a higher and higher recovery point interval.
Yeah. All right. I think we're almost on time. I just want to thank everyone. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Ben. And thank you, everyone who's on the line that joined us today to listen to what we have to say. I hope it was for your benefit. We just want to ask you to please fill out the form. We really appreciate your feedback. And yeah, hope you have a great, wait, let's see if I didn't miss any other question. There's one more question. It's the same person. I know it's a different person, but is there any VMware DR solution for on-prem instead of purchasing EVS for EDR separately? I think it's
So if I understood that right, if you don't want EVS, but you want to
mhm,
protect your on-prem VMs,
yeah.
So I would say AWS has a DRS, or disaster recovery service, right? It's not quite what you're thinking it should be as far as like a normal VMware protection tool. It's an in-guest agent, which actually means you can protect from any hypervisor. It doesn't have to be a VMware VM. It could be Hyper-V. And you can even protect physical servers, but those are going to recover as an EC2 instance, and it's going to recover on a VPC network. So the real engineering challenge there is making sure when this thing wakes up in an environment that doesn't quite look like where it came from, making sure the networking and everything works correctly. But yeah, you can do it without VMware on the far side. That's usually the only other option I would see. Typically, we're going to do like to like, so VMware to VMware. But yeah, VMware to EC2 is an interesting use case as well.
Okay. All right. So anyway, please fill out the form and hope you have a great day. Thank you both for joining me on this afternoon. For you it's morning. For me it's late afternoon.
Thanks for having me again,
Thank
Karen.
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Thanks,
Bye
Aaron.
Richard.
bye.